We are live. Okay, sorry about that. We were there. We started the conversation, and it looks like it wasn't streaming. So I am joined. This is Abdullah Samir. I'm an ex-Muslim, and I'm joined by Jimmy Bangash. Jimmy is a good friend of mine. We've been friends for quite a while now, and I don't know why we just never got to doing this earlier. Jimmy was joking, homophobia. But yeah, no, seriously, like Reason of Faith, we had a little, we were having a little difference of opinion on Twitter, and Reason on Faith suggested, hey, why don't we have a live conversation? So this is something that I've wanted to do for a while, but just never got down to it. So Jimmy, you're a gay ex-Muslim, so you have a very unique set of perspectives, unique experiences that are shared by many others that are growing up, that are gay, that are in the Muslim community. And so tell us, so you come from a Pakistani family. I guess you grew up in London, is it?
Yeah, so it's kind of just I guess, quite a typical story where my mum and dad were from Pakistan, and then my dad came here first and immigrated, and then started working. And then when he had enough money, my mum came over to come and join him. And then all of me and my brothers and sisters were born here, and very much into a South Asian community. So I think, when my parents came here, racism was really, I guess, its peak in many ways. So my dad still talks about when there were signs that were like no blacks, no dogs, no Irish.
Wow.
That's the kind of world that he came into. And often he would try to pretend, actually, because he's really fair-skinned, that he would pretend that he was Irish. Yeah, just wouldn't talk when people were showing him around the room and stuff, so that he would get a room, because actually being Pakistani was even worse than being Irish. But that meant that ethnic minority communities often congregated together because there was a safety in being around other people who were like yourselves. So with that, I guess, comes the standard diaspora things, which is this ability or this desire to really hold on to the culture and community of the country you've emigrated from, and bringing that to the country that is the new country you live in. So we grew up in a Islamic household. It's quite conservative. Like, nobody was wearing a hijab but my parents, my mum would wear a dupatta, which is kind of like the Pakistani scarf. And but all of that was good. Whilst I was living in an Islamic conservative house, at the same time I was going to a secular Western school. So there was this kind of contradiction, I guess, in terms of some of the things that we were learning at home compared to the things that we were learning at school. And then also on a Saturday, we would often go to Arabic school, like to learn how
Madrasa,
to read the
kind of?
Quran. Yeah, kind of. Like, so, I mean, it was a bit depressing because it was actually in the school where we studied. So it was like you'd go Monday to Friday to this school, and then you go back on the Saturday to the same school, but it would just be hired out by the Muslim community. And you'd learn how to read Quran there,
Okay.
which I don't know. I don't know whether you enjoyed that or not, but for me,
I hated
I
it.
hated it so much.
I-
Just this idea of reading something in a language
Yeah.
that I didn't understand. And that was another thing I really hated about Islam, was actually praying in this language that I don't understand, reading in this language that I don't understand, and the value that was placed. Fair enough if you're going to make me read this language that I don't understand, but at least acknowledge that it's such a unworthy and fruitless activity to have me just mouthing noises that I don't understand. But the value that was placed on your ability to make sounds that you didn't understand or comprehend is just mind-blowing now. Like, when I look back, I'm like, actually, if I could read that Quran from Siparo number 1 to 30, I think it is, like, everyone cracks a party, right? Like, they just, oh my God, my son's finished the whole Quran, he's amazing, he's like a mufti in the making. And it matters not one bit that I don't understand a word of what I've read.
Yeah, that's a funny thing, eh?
It's crazy. Conversely, I could read, like, I don't know, a whole book on evolution, which I could understand every single word, and it's not given the same credibility. Or I could read an amazing literary English work, and it wouldn't be given the same gravitas in terms of just making sounds that I don't even understand.
Did you get some sort of gift when you? I mean, I know my one of my family members, one of the kids memorized, actually is getting close to completing to memorize the Quran, and he's getting all sorts of bribes like a Nintendo Switch and like expensive stuff that he wouldn't normally get for his age. And so there's this like massive emphasis, and like, in the family gatherings, it's like, oh yeah, Beta memorized 50% of the Quran. Everyone's like, mashallah, so amazing. So yeah, that's I think this is one reason why, to me, like, religion is such a waste of effort. And I mean, you can say there's some sort of artistic value to it, maybe, but like, to read it, to just pronounce it is one thing, but to memorize it is, it's such a pointless effort. Like, it's such a waste of time. It comes out of the idea of, like, back then, if nobody memorized it, it was gone. Like, that was how you preserved the religion. Now it's like, it's so stupid. It's just like, it's such a pointless, fruitless exercise, like you said, right?
Well, I think it wouldn't be so fruitless if you understood the language you were memorizing, right? So if there's teachings that are all about being good to your elders and being kind to your neighbors and loving each other, and somehow you're picking that up from the Quran when you're reading it. And for me, those teachings didn't necessarily come from the Quran. Actually, they came from my parents telling me that God said you should be good to your elders and good to your neighbors and good to your brothers and sisters and all of that sort of stuff, and you should give charity. So I don't really know the content of the Quran as many other ex-Muslims do in terms of understanding what every chapter and verse is about. I read it in a language I didn't understand, and actually I swindled my way through. So what I did was I learned probably the first 10 pages of Subhana number 1 off by heart, and then I knew where to place my finger and what sounds to make. So every time somebody would ask me to read, I would grab it, and they would, and then I'd just start making the noises by moving my hands across it, and knowing that when my finger reaches here, this is what the noises I have to make. When it reaches here, I have to make these sounds. I probably recognized the word Allah by that point, yeah. And but then one day, one of the mullahs at the front of the mosque pulled out Subhana number 3, opened a random page because he's cottoned on to me, opened a random page and said read, and I was unable to do so, right? And I'm sure that's what Muhammad must have felt like in the cave when the angels came to him.
Read.
So yeah, and so I just thought that actually, what is the value in this? Like, if I'm learning something in a language I don't understand, I don't even know what I'm saying, it's still not teaching me anything. So even if there is something good in religion, like it's something altruistic, I'm not picking that up from enunciating words that I don't understand the meaning of. So for me, it was a laborious thing every Saturday to go to this school. And then also when we, during Ramadan, when you do Tarawih prayers, like when you stand for like what seems like eons to do these prayers in the evenings after fasting, and it was just like, what the hell are you talking about? I don't understand what you're talking about. It's in a language I don't understand. I'm bending down, standing up. I've just been not eating food for however many hours, but somehow this is supposed to bring me closer to God, So that was kind of just the Arabization of Islam, given that it's supposed to be a religion for the entire world, was just completely nonsensical for me.
Is it interesting that the majority of Muslims in the world are not Arabs, right? So you have like probably, I don't know, 80 or maybe even 90, maybe 90% of the Muslims in the world, they're reading this book, they're taught that, you have to read it in this language. And even for the Arabic speaking people, like I had a friend in university and high school he was Egyptian, but he didn't, and he spoke Arabic. He spoke Arabic to his parents, but he didn't understand the Quran because he's like, there's some, the language is different and it's archaic, and it's obviously Malay, they speak differently. Like they just speak this, the spoken word is a little bit different than what you find in the Quran. So you have to learn the Quranic language just for Quranic purposes. But even for them, when they're reading the Quran, a lot of them, the focus is just on reciting it. It's just like you said, it's just on making these sounds for barakah. And especially in the Sufi community, this is like even more emphasized that, read it for barakah, read it in your house, keep the jinns and the shaitan out of your house. For people who are wondering, sipara means like 1/30th of the Quran. So it's a portion. If it's divided into 30 parts, so if someone wants to read the entire Quran over 30 days, they can say Sipara 1. It's also called Juz in Arabic, so that's what he's referring to when he said the first Sipara and the third Sipara. So yeah, it's kind of like the emphasis. Even if I'd say you made a very good point that to people at that time who were living in Muhammad's era, reading the Quran in their language, they would have understood and they would have picked up that there are some good teachings, like take care of orphans and stuff like that, but a lot of it is also just like obey Muhammad, do what the Prophet says, obey your leader and trust him, and if you love Allah, then follow him. So it's a lot of it is not just and you're gonna get this and you're gonna get that, and you fight for Allah, and if you die for Allah, you get this and that and this beautiful paradise, and so it's a lot of it is, you can say it's mind control, right, in a sense.
Yeah. I think also the what you mentioned earlier about, you kind of touched on incentivizing people to complete the Quran. So definitely I would have that. So if I did well in a chemistry test or a biology test, my dad might give me like £1 or £2 to be like, well done. Similarly, if I finished a Sipara, I would get like £1 or £2. And so then I got to this point where I realized it was quite lucrative to lie about finishing a Sipara. And I remember like the first time I lied about doing my prayers, like Dad would be like, have you done your prayers? And really, I just wanted to play Nintendo or something. And so the first time I lied, it was like such a big deal to say, yeah, I've done my prayers, but I hadn't actually. I'm laughing because about the third time my dad figured out and gave me a good slap, like, because he was like, don't lie about religion. God is watching you. And yeah, so there was definitely this incentivizing to finish the Quran. But again, that didn't really seem to. I just think actually, if I was going to propagate a message to people, I do it in a way that's accessible to people. Like if you want to work with an audience of whatever audience is, whether it's a labor force or whether it's an audience that is watching a show, engagement is key really to things being done well. Once people are engaged with something, they spend more time on it, they spend overtime on it. But without having that sort of engagement, you really get people who ended up like me, like hating, going through this activity that just feels like a chore. And I think, when people used to say, oh, Islam is perfect, I did used to wonder that actually I felt like, an intern doing a communications and marketing internship would have a better communication strategy than Allah did. Which was kind of like, really, like, how are you using this word perfection? It seems to have been warped, because if something is perfect, it means that everything about it cannot be improved. Which was kind of like, so when people say Islam is perfect, and I think, but you're teaching the world to read in a language they don't understand, and you're saying that's mandatory, that's not really perfection at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's one of the worst things that Muslims can do, is run around saying Islam is perfect, because all you have to do is find one thing, like the communication strategy, that could be improved, and then it's clearly not perfect.
And that's where the cognitive dissonance comes in. That's where people, they've made these presuppositions that Islam is perfect. They don't realize it's a presupposition, or maybe they do. And then what happens is everything else has to bend in order to meet that sort of presupposition. So if Allah's message isn't clear, no, it must be me. I have the problem inside me. But like, if they just use a little bit of philosophy, a little bit of Occam's razor, well, maybe I don't need to like twist the words to make them make sense. Maybe it's not true. Maybe it's not from God, right? Like simple explanation, right? Rather than all of these elaborate explanations as to why it's not fitting in a society. And
I don't think anything you said is simple, actually. I just think the paradigm that you exist within now allows you to see that as simple.
Yeah.
So when I was Muslim, I didn't have the presupposition, or that wasn't something that I developed. It was given to me. Yeah, it was given to me in the same way that I breathe. Yeah, it was just something that came from birth, actually. So from, when they were whispering the kalima in my ear from when I was born, through to everything from when I would have to say my kalima before I ate food, from when I would have to say alhamdulillah after I sneezed. Like, Islam was just bread and butter and oxygen to me. So people don't necessarily choose that.
Yeah.
Presupposition is handed to them, and inculcated or indoctrinated from their birth, so that's the paradigm that they exist within. So I think from now, this position that you and I are in, where we like, actually, look, it's so simple. If you just don't think that it's perfect, you don't have to twist these words. But at the time, that wasn't necessarily an option, even though it didn't make sense. Part of me was like, this is a failing in my understanding. Yeah, that I don't understand it. But also, some of this is definitely ex-Muslim thoughts about, the development opportunities in its communication strategy. They weren't apparent when I was a child or when I was growing up in Islam.
Yeah.
It just didn't really seem to make sense in certain ways. But that didn't mean that Islam was wrong, ever. In fact, actually, Islam was always right. Islam was always right, especially when it came into conflict with the West. So if I didn't understand, so like evolution or something, trying to make that make sense, I would have to try and take a Islamic perspective. And in my head, I was like, okay, well, evolution, if it is real, it must be because God started the world and then let evolution happen.
Yeah.
That's why we have evolution. It's because Allah made it so in His perfection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you, so what were some of the conflicting values you said you were feeling between what you were taught at home and what you were taught in school?
So I think, so I think maybe less so at home and actually more in the mosque than at home. So my mom's like super chill with her religion, in that she just thinks we should all be really Muslim, but she's not really down with this demonization of the kuffar. It's not something. Her best friend was like a Christian neighbor who was a nurse who's passed away now, but she had and that lady was Indian, but like very sort of Anglo-Indian, like they were Christian. So my mum never had this kind of demonization of Christians or Hindus or Jews or anything like that going on, right? But in the mosque, certainly polytheists like Hindus were just like, what the fuck are they doing? Like, how can their God have 6 arms and be blue, right? Like, it was just like ludicrous. And also that Christians, they had Islam, but then they lost it because they did revisions, and so they kind of had fallen out of favor with God. And with Jews, the same sort of thing, but obviously Jews were evil in many ways because of Palestine, right? And so there's a conflict of just kind of respecting other religions, I guess, which what you would learn in religious education in the school, compared to the idea of superiority of Islam, which is what we would learn in the mosque. Definitely had a conflict there. And then, I remember going to a mosque talk when I was very young, so maybe about 12, 13, 14 years old, and the person at the front of the mosque saying, we shouldn't be taking our best friends from outside of Islam. So the people closest to you should be like Muslims. And I remember like raising my hand to ask a question and saying, well, actually, how am I supposed to convert people if I'm not allowed to have them as friends? And then the man at the front of the mosque, was actually Cat Stevens. He had came to give a talk. Yeah, so it was Yusuf Islam. I got £2 for asking that question from my dad, by the way, because he was like really proud that I stood up in front of the whole community. And then Cat Stevens was like, "Oh, we're not saying you can't talk to them. We're saying that actually you should just not have them as your closest friends."
So Yusuf Islam, who grew up as a non-Muslim, was saying, "Don't be friends with non-Muslims."
Yeah.
That's
well,
crazy.
I was saying that you can be friends with them. They shouldn't be your closest.
You shouldn't be your closest friends. But isn't it crazy? Like it's like
absolutely crazy.
It's like
but this
flipping.
is how it can warp your mind, isn't it? Like,
yeah.
It can. And so then soon after that, it went into school, And I remember two girls having an argument, and there was a point where I tried to get really on the dean, right, when I was struggling with my sexuality. And I remember two girls having an argument, Sobia, and she was Muslim, and another girl, I can't remember what the other girl's name was. So she was Hindu, the other girl, and no, Sobia was having an argument with another girl called Rebecca, and they're both Muslim. And Sajana, who's an Indian girl, was there. And I said to Sobia, why are you arguing with Rebecca? She's Muslim, stop arguing with her. If you want to argue with someone, argue with Sajna, she's Hindu. Like, that's a complete sort of, mental nonsense, isn't it? I was just like, you should have solidarity with your Muslim sister. And if you want to argue with someone, argue with the Hindu person.
Mm-hmm.
But this is like the logic that you ingest when you're like 14, 15 years old, because they're telling you in mosque that actually the people that you should be most connected to are the Muslims, and if you're going to have disagreements, they should be around with people who aren't Muslim, as if just your Islam would unify your thinking and your camaraderie with each other. Made no sense. So there was clashes like that. Clashes like girls, there were white girls in my school who were wearing skirts to school. Like, how comes it was okay for them to do that? But clearly, they were going to go to hell and burn for that at some point anyway. So, these kind of ideas of what we considered sin, and then seeing what we considered sin flagrantly being displayed in school. So you go to mosque, they teach you all of these things are sin. You go to school, every motherfucker's eating ham. It was just like, this doesn't really make much sense. It doesn't add up. Or girls are mixing with boys, it's absolutely fine. All of the things that they taught us, but then when we go on Saturday to the school, the boys wouldn't be supposed to be mixing with the girls. So yeah, it was quite a weird paradigm. But all the while, even though I was able to compartmentalize things and separate them, Islam was true. There was no doubt about that for me. There was definitely Allah up in the heavens. He was definitely watching everything I did. This constant, precarious existence that I had, because at any point you might die, and you don't know whether you've got more good deeds written in your good book or more bad deeds written in your bad book. Mm-hmm. So you never know what's going to happen. And that's a very precarious, anxiety-inducing existence, isn't it? Actually, at any moment you might die. It's not even like a computer game where you could be able to see what your score is, and then actually if I die, at least I know I got a good score, so it's going to be okay. But it's this deliberate mechanism to keep you in a realm of ambiguity and anxiety that then forces you to curtail your behavior or forces you to behave altruistically. And there's nothing altruistic if what you're doing is to try and get you into heaven. It's mental.
It's definitely so. I wanted to just kind of ask you something. So how much do you think this type of teaching of stick among yourselves exists in other traditions, for example, Hinduism or Christianity? I'm not totally sure because obviously I didn't grow up in those, but I do know there's this tribalistic thinking that's inside all of us in general, especially now we're seeing with the rise of the far right and white supremacy, that this kind of keep yourself away from us, keep your values, and you go back to your country kind of thinking is becoming much more of an issue now. But I do think that one thing that's worth highlighting is that there's different levels of harm in different religions and different forms of the same religion. So for example, this teaching of keep among yourselves, that has precedent in the religion, in the religious text, let's say. Especially you find Salafis are very they're much more open about saying this. I remember I went to one event and I was a Muslim. I was Salafi leaning, Salafi being the Saudi sort of the interpretation of Islam based on earlier sources. So they're trying to bring back the 7th century Islam as it was back then. And so I went to this event, and this event was for Rachel Corey. She was a young lady who was in Palestine, and she was bulldozed to death while she had a loudspeaker, and she was saying, don't bulldoze these homes. And so they had this event which was done by the Palestinian Student Association. And I had these two Salafi guys next to me. They were hardcore Salafis. and they were like, "Oh, this is so dumb. Why are these Muslims doing this? She's just a kuffar." And I'm like, "How can you say that?" Like as a Muslim, I was saying, "How can you say that?"
Mm.
Like she did something good with her life. Like she was trying, like no matter where you stand on the Israel-Palestine issue, like her intention was good. Like she was trying to help people. And for you to just kind of like potty mouth her and just say like, "Oh, she's just a dumb kufa or something, or she's gonna go to hell anyways," like to me that was so disturbing. And I was just like I can't believe you guys are saying this. And I think this kind of thinking exists in general, maybe in Islam, but I find that among Sufis, for example, they don't tend to talk like this as much, and they will be more likely to like say, they feel sorry for her, not being on the right kind of path, and she's going to go to hell. She's still going to go to hell probably, although we can't say in particular that particular individual is going to go to hell, but in general she's most likely to go to hell because she was a disbeliever. But they're more likely to say like I feel sad for her rather than like having this sort of antagonistic kind of approach towards her. So what do you think about like that, and like how much it exists in other cultures and religions?
Yeah, and so as you're talking, I'm making notes with my pen so that I just remember to touch on things. I think there's two things you raised there that are quite interesting. So there's one about the tribalism, but the other thing that we should probably spend some time looking at is Palestine. So how much does it occur? I think for me, a measure of that is actually integration for diaspora communities. So when I look at Islamic communities in the UK and I compare them to Hindus or I compare them to Sikhs, so people all from the South Asian sort of area, like Indians and Pakistanis and Bangladeshis, like it's quite clear that Muslims don't integrate to the extent that Hindus and South Asian Christians or anybody else do, right? And I think, sometimes I wonder whether so much of what is haram is kind of built into Western culture in a way, right? So things like going to the pub, having a drink, or intermingling of genders, like that's such a Western thing anyway,
But
in
like,
terms of
isn't
what's
it like a
permissive
universal
over
thing?
here.
Like everybody
It
loves
is,
to
it is.
drink. Everybody loves to like even pre-Islamic Arabia had those things, right?
Yeah, so it definitely is. But I mean, in terms of in the context of tribalism in the UK, like what I'm saying is that actually with Western culture, there people are fine with intermingling, and actually in Indian culture, there's intermingling as well, right?
Yeah.
So when you look at Hindus or Sikhs, they're able to integrate in a way that isn't conflicting with their faith. But with Islam, we're all Muslim first before we're even human, right? So
Hmm.
it's like actually you have to be Muslim first, and then you can be a human being secondary to that. Like then your brotherhood of humanity comes after that, but your brotherhood of Islam precedes your brotherhood of humanity in many ways. So by setting up that perimeter around the ummah and your brotherhood of religion, that kind of does stop you from integrating with people, because what you're saying is actually, well, I can't mix with the other gender, so we have incidences of of people refusing, of men refusing to shake women's hands, which
Yeah.
actually, how that comes across in the society that you've moved into, is not very favorably. So I think it's disingenuous to assess the level of tribalism and the erosion of that tribalism as similar across all religious communities. I don't think that is accurate.
Yeah, no,
And I
I don't
think
think
that,
it's similar. I don't think
yeah,
so. Yeah.
and I think also we're a lot more steadfast towards it. Like we're in some ways we see ourselves as the savior of the world. Like Islam is the
Muslims, you
savior
mean,
of the
right? Yeah.
world. Yeah, Muslims are the saviors of the world. Islam will save the world. At some point, the whole world is going to be Muslim. So
Yeah.
we have to really. So for your viewers, this is the stuff that we're taught, right? So that actually at some point in the future, the whole world will be Muslim, and actually it's our responsibility to maintain that level of commitment. So we're not allowed to have this erosion of our faith that allows for integrating in the same way that Hindus or Sikhs might do. And I don't know Hinduism and Sikhism inside out, so I don't know if they feel like they're the saviors of the world and everyone must be Sikh or Hindu one day.
Christians
It's
definitely think that.
Yeah, Christians definitely think that. And Christians definitely think that. And I think maybe if we weren't in a Christian country, then that tribalism might manifest differently. But because we're in a country that's secular and the religion was predominantly Christianity, and we're seeing more and more that is people are becoming atheist or secular, that again doesn't manifest in the same way that it does in the Muslim community. So I think we have like a fence put up around us, like as a community, that says, actually, this is who we are, this is what we do, and this is what we don't do, and don't expect us to conform in those ways. And you know, when it comes down to eating ham or drinking alcohol, that's quite benign. It doesn't really matter that we don't do that. But when it comes down to not shaking a woman's hand, or not shaking a man's hand, or not showing your face in public, you know, then things become more problematic and quite pernicious, actually.
Yeah,
So the second
was.
thing is, the last
Go
thing,
ahead.
just to touch on that. So because you mentioned Palestine, and I'm just thinking how
Yep.
simple the narrative for Palestine was for me when I was Muslim, which was Jews are evil, Muslims are good, evil Jews are oppressing good Muslims in Palestine.
Yeah.
But, and to bring this right back to tribalism, if Palestinians were Hindu, you wouldn't hear a peep out of us. You really wouldn't. Like, it doesn't matter what the human rights abuses are, you wouldn't hear a peep out of Muslims if Palestinians were Hindu.
Yeah, I think part of
that's
it
so
though,
disgusting.
but I do think that part of it is inextricably linked to the fact that Palestine / Israel, that land is holy to these different religious groups. So that's like that's a problem that's like never gonna go away, because they think it's holy and they also think it's holy, and you know, one group thinks it's their religious God-given right that this special land, you know, it's theirs to own. The other group thinks that they have some religious significance. You know, Muhammad went there as well. Even Christians think that Jesus, you know, the Holy Sepulchre, I think it's called, his tomb is there as well. So we need secularism, right? We need secularism to kind of take care of this issue. But obviously it's going to be complicated, because nobody wants to admit, like, there's hardliners on both sides that are not willing to negotiate, and it's just such a messy situation that's made worse by religious beliefs, I think.
Yeah, I think, listen, I'm not trying to get into the ins and outs of the Israeli-Palestine conflict. What I'm trying to say is, actually, let's bring it back to tribalism, because sometimes we act like the conversation from the Muslim perspective is that Jewish people or Israel is conducting human rights abuses in Palestine and Israel, and this must be challenged by the United Nations. It must be challenged by the international community. And what I'm saying is, that is just a convenient rhetoric, because this is a regional conflict. And actually, if that regional conflict was between Jews and Christians, we wouldn't be bothered about it in our community.
Muslims,
they wouldn't be talking. So no, if it was between Jews and Christians in Palestine,
Muslims wouldn't care, you're saying, right?
Wouldn't care. Like, it's not like we're this passionate group around human rights who are like, oh my God, these human rights are being abused. It's only because there's a Muslim people that we're so bothered by it. Because if they were Hindu, or if they were Sikh and Jewish people were doing whatever they consider as human rights abuses, you wouldn't hear a peep out of us. We'd be like, Palestine, where's that?
I think that's a kind of human condition too, because, well, for sure, Islam kind of puts all Muslims on the same. Well, hold on.
But is it, Abdullah? Because when we look at people who are leaning into the conversation about Israel and Palestine, we see secular people, we see non-Muslim people leaning into that conversation to say, look, actually, here is occupation, and we must stand against it. So, and we see that happening in Western countries, where so that's actually a manifestation of not being tribal. People are saying what they consider human rights abuses.
True.
But and the Muslims are amongst that conversation. So it looks like Muslims are all championing human rights abuses. But actually, if this was Hindu people and Jewish people and that conflict was happening, all of the Muslim voices would drop out, and it would just be like non-Muslims talking about human rights.
So I have something to say about that. So what I think about what you said is that so they would be like human. Okay, so the reason there's such a big voice around the Palestine-Israel issue among Muslims is because it's looked at as a Muslim issue, as you correctly said. And you're right, the secular, you know, human rights-minded people will definitely still be doing it, and there'd be some Muslims among that. Probably a small percent, you know, just like. But what I am saying is, what I noticed is that this is also part of the okay. So Islam does try to make this whole kind of global community, this ummah idea, which is what is causing Muslims to kind of support this. So it's become a political thing. But in general, I do think that, for example, when there was like an earthquake in like Iran, like the Persian Students Association would come and they would like please help us, right? When there was a earthquake in so the regional type of issues definitely are jumped on by people that are connected to that issue, because I feel like there's a bug in our morality that we don't care about large groups of other people, and that's we care more about individual people. So if somebody falls down and gets hurt, like a kid, you'd be more concerned about them. But if you heard like 1,000 or like 10,000 people died, you're just like, oh, like okay, what's next on the news, kind of like. So we have this sort of bug in our morality that we care more about individuals over groups of people. And I think that this tribalism thing definitely comes out, and I think what Islam has done, I do agree with you what you're saying, I'm not disagreeing with you, but I do think that what Islam has done is it has latched on this idea of like tribalism and made it into like the tribe is now Muslims. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, whereas, for example, for like Desis or Chinese or whatever, they have the tribal issues too, but they don't see the tribe as being other outsiders. Whereas, for example, Christians would do the same thing. You have Chinese Christians who would try to help the Christians who are suffering in Muslim countries, even though they're not those people are not Chinese, but they see the Christian community as a global community as well. And I have to give credit obviously to Christians as well for the human rights work that they do in general. It does tend to be more universalist, and they do help. What I mean. Yeah, like it's for sure. Like I've seen that Christians and even Ismailis, I think too. But Ismailis, you find the same thing too. Like Aga Khan will spend his money to help Ismailis in particular above the general needs. Of course they do. He does a lot of human rights. Not human rights, a lot of like philanthropy, and he builds hospitals and he builds schools, and it's not limited only to Ismailis, no way, right? Like I've seen a lot of that, like in Egypt, which there's no Ismailis in Egypt. He, Aga Khan, he replaced his gigantic dump, which was like a garbage dump, and he made it into a beautiful garden. So that was like completely philanthropic, right? There's no benefit to Ismailis there, and it's one of the most beautiful parks I've ever been in. But I think I do agree with you, but I think that what's happening here is that Islam has hijacked that, just like the idea of like self-preservation. We all have this idea of self-preservation that's encoded into our genetics, and Islam takes that and adds the idea of hell, and Christianity too, and says you're going to go to hell. So this idea, this self-preservation kicks in, right? And the same idea, I think, with the tribalism, Islam has made a religious tribe out of the whole world, right? Out of all the Muslims have become like a religious tribe now.
Yeah. So, but I think secular societies are seeing a dissolving of that tribalism, and even when you look at Christian charities, they're much more universalistic in terms of who they reach out to assist in terms of global disasters or whatever. But add to that, like, so when you look at the ex-Muslim movement, so I'm involved with a number of like apostate organizations. So I work with Council of Ex-Muslims a lot, and as soon as China started rounding up people in concentration camps, the Council of Ex-Muslims of Britain, we did a press release straight away to say, look, we're condemning this. It's not okay. Similarly, as soon as New Zealand happened, we sent out a press release around that. And actually, conversely, if you compare that to Chechnya at the moment, where they're rounding up gay men in concentration camps, like the last article I read was they got another 40 gay men, started rounding them up. Two other men were killed who were gay. And it's like the silence of like ex-Muslims speaking out against what essentially isn't our tribe in very many ways, and we're often ostracized from that community. And for myself, I'm really interested in broadening this definition of Muslim so that it does include ex-Muslims in it, because I see us as all part of the same community, because we generally live in the same houses as Muslims, right? But the way that ex-Muslims will stand up for human rights of Muslims compared to the way that Muslims will not stand up for gay people's human rights in Muslim countries, they will not stand up for apostate rights in Muslim countries, and often not even stand up for other religious communities' human rights in Muslim majority countries. I think it's one, it's quite irksome, but two, it plays a direct contrast to the rhetoric around Palestine and, oh my God, it's an apartheid state and look how they're treating these people. And really what you mean is Muslims are suffering, it's not okay. You don't mean people are suffering or human beings are suffering, it's not okay. That is not the rhetoric that we have. And it's not even what we're taught in the mosque. It's like, oh, Jews, a whole load of anti-Semitism around Jews, right? Like how evil they are and how wicked they are and how they fell out of favor with God, and then what they're doing to our Muslim brothers and sisters in Palestine. And it's not about, these are human beings with human rights that should be protected, and nothing about that, Abdullah, is universal. So the demands that we have for the Palestinian people as a Muslim community are not demands that we will extend to the Ahmadiyya Muslims in Pakistan. They're not the same demands that we will extend to gay people in Muslim countries. So this is just about protecting Muslims in the Ummah. It's not about human rights. And I think it's a depressing reality.
I do think that, like, what you're saying is true. There are Muslims that do care about doing charity and, you know, helping others outside of the religious circle. Like I've seen in my community in Canada, they have, like, they do volunteer at soup kitchens. They have blood donations. I was actually surprised when they had a blood donor drive. Some Muslims were saying, no, you shouldn't do it. And I was like, what? Like, it's weird. Why? Well, why wouldn't you want to give blood? And it was the same kind of like, oh, these are kuffar. And not even these are kuffar. They're like, oh, this is going to go to the army, the Canadian army, to like kill Muslims or something. So that type of kind of toxic thinking does exist in the community. But the Muslims did like do this not daily, this and I think it was an annual blood donation thing through the Canadian Red Cross and Canada Blood Services. So one thing I do want to say though is I don't know if this sort of universalist dropping or breakdown of tribalism is happening, because what I'm seeing is people are becoming more tribal than ever before. Like the rise of the far right is actually quite scary. Like people are like really pushing back, and they're saying, and like with the China thing. So two things I want to say about the China oppressing Muslims thing. One thing is, not all ex-Muslims see things the way you and I do, and not all, like I've heard a lot of people tell me China is doing a good thing. They're clamping down on terrorism. It seems like I lost your video. Are you still here?
I'm still here.
Okay. So hold on a second. Let me see what happened there.
Nothing has changed from my side.
Okay. It disappeared for 1 second. Let me see if I can get you back. Oh, you're back. Okay. So China. So two things about China. One is, I have a friend that actually messaged me like a few weeks ago, and he's like, go look at the ex-Muslims in North America page about the post about China. And I looked, and obviously the post about China was saying that China was doing something bad. And then people were like all commenting like, oh, China is doing a good thing, way to go China. I get comments like this now, like more than ever before. I never used to get like this type of like hateful kind of anti-Muslim bigotry. I mean, that's exactly what it is. Like the Muslims in China, they should have, in my opinion, every right to pray, fast, not eat pork, not be forced, practice Ramadan, whatever they want, because that's the freedom of religion. They should have freedom of religion, right? We're not talking about pushing it on someone else. We're talking about freedom of expression in religion. But like there's a big push against this now, that people are saying, well, no, they're Muslim, so they shouldn't have that because this is terrorism or something. I don't know how they're conflating that. So that's one thing. The second thing is, like, kudos on, you know, CEMB and EXMNA for actually fighting against this, because, and the reason we as ex-Muslims are fighting for the rights of Muslims is because we have better values. Like, frankly speaking, we have humanistic, liberal values. We believe it's okay for you guys to practice your religion. We don't have a problem with that, right? As long as you're not forcing it on anybody else. So this is why humanistic values are superior to religious morality. You've just highlighted that. Like, why all the emphasis on, what's happening in China and what's happening to Muslims in Palestine, but no, like, Muslims will never sadly admit that Palestinians are doing anything wrong whatsoever.
Never. I didn't believe that Palestinians were doing anything wrong. And then when I left Islam, and I was like, oh my God, they're training kids like 3 years old that they should kill Jews. Like, that's your life mission. You know, when you're indoctrinating people with that, that's absolutely mental. So I think very much, Abdullah, that the answer to terrorism, to extremism within Muslim communities is really ex-Muslim voices, like really ex-Muslim voices. But I think the first answer to all of the issues in the Muslim world is the secular education of Muslim women. That will literally solve all of our problems, whether it's population, whether it's economic or whatever. That will solve all of our issues. And we've seen countries that have invested in women's education have phenomenal success in terms of changing their societies.
For example,
so Korea,
okay.
In Korea, when they did that, like, they were having population growth issues and economic issues. When you educate women, you see a complete turn in the tide. Because, you know, all of a sudden 50% of your labor force and your community is now much more adept and mobile in a way that it wasn't before, granting them education. And I think that's really is where a strong emphasis needs to go. But the other thing that we can do is really emphasize ex-Muslim voices, because we can deconstruct the religion, but also the experience. And, you know, there's the way that humanity often relate to each other is through the stories that we have, right? So there's this academic deconstructing of the religion, which someone like Dawkins might do, but then there's the experience that Muslims go through that ex-Muslims can completely use to shape our narration and help people relate to, because they're going through the same sort of experiences themselves. And I think that's the mechanism through which we need to just deconstruct Islamic extremism, and probably also Islamic conservatism, is by talking more, by having more ex-Muslims. I mean, I don't know about you, but in the last 5 years, when I look on Twitter now, how many people have ex-Muslim in their bio compared to 5 years ago is just heartening.
Yeah, absolutely. But my concern about that is it just becomes another type of like tribalism, where we're saying definitely we should support ex-Muslims, but I think we do have to look and see at what ex-Muslims are saying too, because like I said, some ex-Muslims do fall into bigotry too. Like I've seen ex-Muslims that are basically demonizing Muslims, and it's not always a black and white line. So sometimes it's tricky, right? Like I actually defended Almin Navabi when he was being attacked by someone online after the Christchurch massacre, because he had a post he had written an interview he had done where he said Islam is like Nazism. It's even worse than Nazism. So I personally disagreed with him, but I supported his right. Like he wasn't. I don't think he was demonizing Muslims. Like I do think what he was saying, there's some problems with what he was saying, but I understand where he's coming from. He was saying that Islam has some sort of like harmful ideas in it, but it's covered in like beautiful teachings and stuff like that. So people see it as less harmful than like obvious straight up like, you know, racist supremacism, right? So that was his argument, and I was defending his right to say it, even though I disagree with him. But there are people like not Almin Navabi, but others that I feel like they've crossed the line and they've got into demonizing Muslims. For example, if someone is saying that what China is doing is a good thing, like you are not my ally at all. Like I have nothing to do with you.
No, completely, I agree. I think so. There's a few things that come up. Right? So I work with Yasmin Mohammed on a campaign called Free Hearts, Free Mind, and what that does is we give 6 coaching sessions to people in Muslim majority countries who are ex-Muslims to give them mental health and coaching support. And I think when you do that kind of work and you're exposed to ex-Muslims in Muslim majority countries, you're much more exposed to the actual suffrage and restrictions that people are going through. Because for me, my Islamic oppression is a walk in the park, because I'm in a Western secular country, and also because I'm economically independent of family and such. But for people in Muslim majority countries, it's really, really quite difficult. But I think also, so I'm not justifying anti-Muslim bigotry. What I am saying is that the journey of apostasy often involves this stage of anger. And I don't know if you had that. For me, there was a complete stage of anger where I was really quite angry at Muslims, at Islam, at being duped, at all the hate that was directed towards me, at being influenced to believe that gay people like myself should be killed. Like, I got so angry about how I'd been duped into what essentially was really hate-filled ideas, that it would have been easy, Abdullah, to slip into anti-Muslim bigotry. Yeah. So I think there's a journey of becoming an apostate that actually has quite an emotional journey that goes with it. Yeah. So whether it's anger, whether it's shame, whether it's fear, all of those emotions come up over that journey. And I think sometimes you're right, some ex-Muslims slip into that hatred of Islam and then conflate that with hatred of Muslims, and that can happen. But at the same time, I think that these people have to be allowed to speak, because if they're not allowed to speak, they're just going to try and hold it all in and congregate with each other behind closed doors. And I think that's more sinister than allowing these people to say their hateful stuff, and then people like you and me saying, actually, look, you seem to have conflated people with Islam, and you've done this. Let's help you separate them out. Or maybe you don't want to, but let's just explore separating these two things out so that you can see the religion over here and the people over here. But also, when you look at the people over here, remember you were one of them.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I mean? So what you're saying today about these people, somebody else could have been saying about you a year ago, and would that have been true? Because Muslims are people, and people can change. I was Muslim and I changed, and there's no point having this ongoing animosity towards people as if I'm superior to them, when actually, however many years ago, I was one of that community and had some really hideous beliefs, worse than some other Muslims. You know, I don't know how many Muslims actually believe that at the same time as me, that actually a gay person should have been executed. You know, that's not 100% of Muslims. That's quite an extreme belief to believe that. So walking around with that, but then being able to get to this position where actually now I champion human rights for Muslims and everybody else, means that everyone else can do that. So when we see ex-Muslims crossing into anti-Muslim bigotry, I think rather than stepping into this space of demonizing them, understanding that actually this is just an opportunity for conversation, and many of us were in that angry space, and I don't know whether you went through that anger yourself or not.
My apostasy was, in a sense, it wasn't difficult for me because I'm a sort of convert to Islam. My mom is Sunni Muslim, not very religious, never was religious. My dad was Ismaili Muslim, and so I converted to Sunni Islam, and he was very liberal too. My whole family is liberal, so I never had those, like, I never suffered for leaving Islam, you could say, like, sort of, but nowhere near like what you went through or what anybody, like most people in Muslim countries went through. My family was accepting of me, so the anger I had was that I was duped out of, you know, making like less optimal decisions than I could have made if I wasn't weighing this holy book up here and going by what it said. For example, I never worked at a bank, I never got a mortgage, I was praying 5 times a day, which wasn't really necessary. Like, I was fasting, even though like I hated fasting. So there was a lot of things I did that, and I felt that, like, in a sense, I do feel robbed of those years of life, because I could have been doing something differently then. But it is part of who I am and who I was, and so I want to help other people to see that this is not true. And obviously, like, if I never converted to Sunnism, I could never talk about it like I do today. Like, as an even if I was an ex-Ismaili, I would have nothing to say about like Orthodox Sunni Islam. So I never kind of went through that anger phase, and so I think sometimes it's difficult for me to kind of it's difficult for me to understand what someone like yourself, or even especially someone in a Muslim country that's going through, that's either gay or a closeted ex-Muslim. It's very, very difficult. So I kind of want to call people back to, like, you know, we need to stick to our human rights, and we need to stick to a liberal, liberalistic enlightenment values, right? We don't want to fall into this, even though you had these terrible experiences, and I don't deny any of those experiences, but we need to always pull back to, like, you know, what type of society do we want to live in? Professors of ethics and ethicists came up with this idea of the veil of ignorance. And what the veil of ignorance says is, it's kind of like what you can do with your kids. You can think of it like this: you have a cake, and you have two kids, and the kids are fighting over who gets a bigger slice. So what you do is you tell one of the kids, you get to cut the cake, and the other kid gets to decide which slice he wants. So of course, how is he going to cut it? He's not going to cut one giant slice and one small slice. So the same thing. The veil of ignorance is a thought experiment that you get to make the laws however you want, but you don't get to decide who you're born as. So let's say you're a white supremacist and you think that all Muslims should be thrown in jail or whatever, like locked up, sent back to wherever. And then, but you don't get to choose whether you're born as a white guy or whether you're born as a brown Muslim, right? Or an ex-Muslim. Or you're a Muslim and you don't get to choose that you're born as an ex-Muslim, or you become an ex-Muslim in Saudi. So now, would you choose those laws? Would you choose those? No, you wouldn't. No one would choose those laws. So this veil of ignorance is a great thought experiment that helps people to kind of look outside of the current perspective that, yes, I might be a privileged, I'm a privileged ex-Muslim. I say that because I'm in the West and I never suffered like those guys do. So I definitely empathize with them, but it's definitely a struggle for me when they fall into bigotry, because I also empathize with Muslims that are living in Canada that are scared of, being attacked because of the growing anti-Muslim rhetoric, like the 3 Muslims that were killed in the US in a parking lot, the Muslims that are being harassed in the streets. It's happening more and more, and it worries me because I don't want to live in that type of society. So I think that's where the balancing act is so difficult for me, right?
So I think a couple of things that I want to touch on. So one of them is, I'm just going to make a note. So one of them is this, you're feeding anti-Muslim hate with the stuff that you're saying that I get leveled at all the time, right? And I think as you posted this broadcast and you said, oh, we're going to have a talk on Facebook, somebody jumped on that and was like, oh, blah, 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 anti-Muslim hate, just make sure you're not feeding into anti-Muslim hate with your criticisms. And I was like, oh, I just yawn when I hear it. I'm so bored of people coming to me saying, when you talk about Islam, what you're doing is you're fueling anti-Muslim hate. And it seems like that is leveled at everyone. As people as Care Bear, as someone like Urshad Manji. Do you remember Urshad Manji?
Yeah.
I never hear of her anymore.
Yeah.
People, I remember her talking at, I think it was Cambridge or Oxford, and somebody in the audience saying you're feeding anti-Muslim hate. What's that? Mona El Tahawi, she's an Egyptian feminist who's Muslim. People level her with, actually, you're feeding anti-Muslim hate with your criticism of Muslim communities and of Islam. And I'm like, these are actual Muslims. These are 2 Muslim women, right? One of whom is gay, the former of whom is gay. And they get hit with, actually, if you criticize Islam. Women in the Labour Party in the UK, stood up and said, what we're finding is that Muslim men are telling us not to go for leadership positions because we're Muslim women. Yeah, and when they stood up and they said that, they were hit with, you are feeding racist viewpoints on Muslim men by saying this, so keep your mouth shut. In the 80s and 90s, when Southall Black Sisters, which is a organization that works for women who suffer domestic violence and domestic abuse in Black and Asian communities, when they stood up and said, you know what, we're not sending women back to their husbands anymore, like how we've been doing for years in our community. When your husband beats you up, you go to a safe house, the women patch that woman up and then send her back to her husband so that she can go back to her abuser. We're not doing that anymore. We're sick of this model. We're going to start helping women get educated, helping women get onto the housing association so they can get a home away from these men. When that happened and they started saying, you Muslim men, you Hindu men, you Sikh men, you South Asian men, you're beating your women and it's unacceptable, they were leveled with accusations of generating racism. You cannot say anything critical of brown people, it seems, without somebody saying to you, you're fueling racism. Even, you can't march in gay pride. We marched in gay pride saying Allah is gay and fuck Islamic homophobia. And we were hit with, you are fueling anti-Muslim hate. So it really seems like there's no way of doing this that somebody isn't going to level you with accusations of anti-Muslim hate. Yeah. But for people like us, like Abdullah, like who have been in this arena for some time now, we're just as critical of far-right white nationalism because it's targeted at me, for fuck's sake. Like, it's targeted at me as well. So I don't have this place where I can be safe from it. It's actually targeted towards me. But I have to be honest, like, what is my primary concern as somebody? What is my primary threats that come towards me? As a gay man in the UK, I'm much more afraid of the homophobia in my Muslim community than I am around white nationalism in the UK community. Well, of this, and there was a recent assessment where they said the UK is probably the least racist place in Europe at this point in time. So for me, it's not as high as priority, which is why I don't talk about it as much as actually things like homophobia, which in my community are endemic and actually are on the rise. They're not on. When we see this resurgence of Islamic conservatism that's happening, when I see more and more girls who are like 3, 4, 5 years old being covered up with a hijab, for me, that's stuff I need to speak out against because it's on my doorstep. It's right next door to me.
Yeah, you bring up a lot of really good points, and
wait, and I guess okay. Let me throw a question to you.
Yep.
So when we look at this condemnation of Muslims that you said is growing, I just remember Asra Nomani saying, to some extent, she feels like much of the problems we encounter, we are responsible for. And Abdullah, like, if you work in a business, or if you're running your own business, or you work in an organization, if a department is failing, and that department is saying, our department is perfect, like, there's nothing wrong with it, it's absolutely perfect, but yet we can see that the staff turnover is going through the roof. We can see that the revenues that department is generating is going into the red and actually is not generating revenue. Then what happens is the other parts of the business or external competitors look at that department and say, look, these are the things that are wrong with it, because that particular department isn't taking responsibility for itself. And I think that we can say, and the same if it was a department in the government, like if there's a department in the government and actually it's saying everything is hunky-dory, everything is perfect in this department, but actually its customers are saying this is abysmal, this is not working out for us, we can see you're not meeting your SLAs, so your service level agreements, and actually we can see that you're hemorrhaging money. People start looking in, and then what happens is we demand from that department increased remedial actions, increased responsibility, and increased scrutiny. And I think to some extent, we have that same issue with the Muslim community, in that actually we will say over and over again, Islam is perfect, there's nothing wrong with our community, homophobia has nothing to do with Islam, ISIS has nothing to do with Islam. So we're just completely saying there's nothing wrong with our community, and that does generate animosity. That really does generate animosity. Because you're not, as a community, taking any responsibility for the nonsense that's happening in your community. You're not taking any responsibility for actually, even though the Quran might say, don't hit your wife, but it actually says do hit your wife. So even though the Quran might say do hit your wife, and Muslims will say, oh, you're only supposed to beat her with a handkerchief or a twig. But we have to look at actually in what ways does Islamic patriarchy set things up so it's easy to abuse women? Like, in what ways does it ostracize them if they speak out? In what ways does it keep them segregated so that they can't report things to members outside of their families? In what ways does it discourage them from engaging with law enforcement, which is non-Muslim? So if we can't do this stuff as a community, outside forces are going to look at us and say, you are not handling the nonsense that happens in your community. This means you require increased scrutiny, which means you have to have increased responsibility and accountability, and you need to have an increase in remedial actions. And I think that generates so much hatred towards us as a community.
Absolutely. So Asra Nomani is an interesting character. I don't know too much about her, but I do know she voted for Trump, which to me is a very kind of strange thing for an ex-Muslim like person.
She's not ex-Muslim, she's Muslim.
Oh, see,
All three of the people I quoted for you, all three of the people who get
yeah,
labeled with fueling anti-Muslim hate,
yeah,
those three women are all Muslim women. The first one, Urshad Manji, is a Muslim
yeah.
lesbian. The second one, Mona El-Tahawi, is an Egyptian feminist Muslim woman, and she leads every interview she does these days with "fuck the patriarchy."
Okay.
Asma Nomani is also a Muslim woman, and
Yeah,
she challenges hijab. She calls it rape culture,
yeah,
and she did a equating to how it is equated to rape culture.
yeah,
All of these people, and these are Muslims. So I'm telling you, I have no stand. I don't stand a chance as someone who's ex-Muslim criticizing Islam of people not telling me that I'm fusing anti-Muslim hate, which is why I yawn at it and I roll my eyes now,
yeah.
because you're telling Muslim women who are speaking up about the oppression that they face that they're fueling white racism. So of course you're going to tell me that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would be concerned with anybody that supports Trump just based on his type of policies. I mean, he tried to do a Muslim ban, even though it was very selective, and he banned the countries he wanted. He didn't ban Saudi, which is hilarious, which is where the so-called 9/11 attackers came from. But like he it was a Muslim ban. I mean, Trump is appealing to this segment of the population, and to find Muslims, some Muslims falling in there is very strange, because like they're supporting policies that's going to hurt them in the long run. That's what I think. But anyways, Trump aside, that fellow who said that thing about you're going to be supporting hate, this guy, he's very sensitive to that topic. But the point in general.
Oh, and I love him. I know him. I love him to pieces. Atom, if you're out there, I love you. That's for you, babe. Like, he's a cool guy, and it's just every single time I post,
Yeah.
if it's not him,
Yeah.
it's somebody else. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's to the point where I don't even bother to respond to it now. I'm like, actually,
Yeah, I know how you feel.
It's so boring. Like, actually, here's my criticism of Islam.
Yeah.
Or here's my criticism of. Or what I'm saying is in Chechnya, Muslim people
Yeah.
are putting gay Muslims and gay ex-Muslims into concentration camps, and
it's terrible.
they're electrocuting us, for
Yeah.
fuck's sake.
Yeah.
You know, some of the reports that were coming out was that they're attaching probes to their ears and to their bodies, and they're electrocuting them, and the men are saying the pain was so excruciating. And then we find somebody else who's killed with knife wounds from the same concentration camps, and your response to me is, Jimmy, stop feeding, or Jimmy, be careful.
Yeah.
You don't feed anti-Muslim hate. Your priorities are messed up, and actually, that statement, I would argue, your statement to me, where I'm talking about the human rights of gay people who are both Muslim and ex-Muslim, and your statement to me saying don't fuel anti-Muslim hate, I think out of the two of us, your statement fuels more anti-Muslim hate, because what it does show to people who are non-Muslim, and whether they're far-right white nationalists or whether they're your everyday Hindu or Sikh person in the UK, is they see that one person is speaking up for human rights of gay people who are both Muslim and ex-Muslim, but then the Muslim person steps forward and instead of supporting those human rights claims says, hey, hang on a minute, don't make us look bad. But who's making us look bad? Is it me speaking up about these issues, or is it what Muslim people in Chechnya are doing?
That's a good point. I mean,
it makes no sense.
That's a great point. I mean, by blocking people from speaking about these things, people are actually making the situation worse. They're pushing this. I mean, that's in a sense why, Trump won, and it was such a surprise to people that he won, because people are not allowed to talk about these things. So
same thing with Brexit, if you ask me. It's the same thing.
The sentiment is there, and it's growing and growing, and people are like, "Oh no, you racist pig." So I think people like yourself and myself, we are able to distinguish between true bigotry versus where it's conflated. And you're right that people like myself, I don't know how much more I could defend Muslims. And one of my best friends from I've known him for I don't know how many years. He doesn't know my what I do that much. He knows I'm ex-Muslim, but he actually accused me. He said listen to this. He sent me a message on the morning of the attack. And he's like, your anti-Dawa has reached New Zealand. And I'm like, what, somebody famous mentioned me or something? Like what happened? Somebody must have mentioned me to you from New Zealand? I thought maybe someone in New Zealand left Islam, and he went on, he mentioned, I read Abdullah Samir's blog or something. But of course, it was when I found out, I was pissed off. I was like, you're putting me in that same boat as that guy? who like kills Muslims. Like, I've been speaking against that since I started speaking. Like, how could you put me? And I'm like, did you even watch any of my, like, so I get what you're saying. And I think we,
So no, hang on, because you just raised another point. So Abdullah, I'm not as reinforcing of it as you are. Like, I feel like every time you take a breath to criticize Islam,
Yeah.
you also take this other breath to say, oh, either not all Muslims or distinguish between Muslims and Islam.
Yeah.
Like, you do that with every critique, you do that. I don't bother. Like, because even when you're doing that, you're still getting leveled with it. So I'm like, there's no winning to this argument.
Yeah.
If Muslims who criticize Islam still get accused of fueling anti-Muslim hate, if Abdul Samir, who's an ex-Muslim who criticizes Islam, but then makes sure that he stipulates with every critique that you mustn't conflate Muslims and Islam, if you still get accused with fueling anti-Muslim hate, I understand that that's a no-win game.
I think that people that don't care and just want to basically attack, anybody that's speaking against Islam, they will definitely say this no matter what I do. But people that actually do care, they will see that, hey, look, Abdullah Samir, he is not against us. He is sincere in what he's saying, that he doesn't believe in Islam, but he takes the time to make sure that his words are not, it's a personal responsibility for myself. I don't care, like, because of what you said, like, I could be as pro-Muslim as possible and I'll still be attacked. So I don't care what people think. Like, I'm not here to please Muslims. A lot of people think I'm pandering to Muslims. No, I don't give a shit, because they don't care anyways. They still hate me. Like, I made a video where I said, this guy was attacking me and he was saying something about me because I was saying Muhammad was not a pedophile. And he was insulting me and calling me a pedophile apologist. Now, here's a funny thing. I made a video explaining that I don't agree with, child marriage and this and that, but I don't think for whatever reason Muhammad falls into that category. And I still had Muslims telling me, this is the funniest thing. I had one guy saying, this is the best video you ever did, but you still deserve what you got. I was like, oh my God, you deserve being attacked even though you're on our side. I was like, what?
It's crazy.
So I'm not
one of the other crazy things is that you are responsible for the New Zealand shootings, but actually, when you say, it says explicitly in the Quran, beat your wife, Islam isn't responsible for men beating their wives.
Yeah.
Like that, how are you rationalizing this? Like, it tells you, or if a hadith says execute gay people and kill gay people, when ISIS are killing gay people, that has nothing to do with Islam.
Yeah.
But when you are criticizing Islam over here in Canada, somehow you're responsible for the New Zealand shooting.
So that's a good point.
That makes no sense.
That's a good point where you said this nothing to do with Islam crowd. We have to fight against that, and I'm definitely not one of them. I think the difference between me and like a Muslim is a Muslim would say nothing to do with Islam, not my Islam. I would say, well, actually it does have something to do with Islam. Maybe not the Islam you believe in and Islam you follow, but there is something to do with Islam, because obviously Muslims themselves are saying it has something to do with Islam. Not all Muslims, but obviously ISIS is Islamic as Ahmadiyya Muslims, right? They're both Islamic. It's just that you can't say it has nothing to do with Islam, because obviously it's coming from the texts, right? So there's some precedent there, right? So that's the difference between, and we have to support people that say, like, we have to be against people that say nothing to do with Islam, because it's ridiculous to say that, right?
So I think if people who say it's got nothing to do with Islam just took the time to sit with how they're feeling, which would be very defensive and probably vilified, spend a bit of time understanding those are the emotions that you're going through, and then once that calms, because you've spent some time with it, ask the question, what has this got to do with Islam? And if you ask that question as a Muslim person, honestly, that's beneficial for the Muslim community. So if you look at actually domestic violence in the Muslim community, and instead of saying, this has nothing to do with Islam because you're feeling vilified as a community, let that anger, let that fear, let that defensiveness, just let it pass. And then collectively as a group of people, ask the question, what has this got to do with Islam? And start listing the ways, because then you can do something about it. So if we start saying, actually, it's got to do with Islam because it has verse 434, it's got to do with Islam because it places men on such a pedestal compared to women that it allows this violence to be facilitated without there being any legal recourse. It's got to do with Islam because it teaches women that they should be obedient, so that actually if their husband does hit them, they worry about going towards Sharia court because that's seen as defiance and disobedience. It's also got to do with Islam because what happens to a woman when she gets divorced is that she will lose her children underneath Sharia, and the man will go and get the kids. So actually that is more likely to prohibit her from reporting the violence that she faces. If we just ask from this really real place of earnestness, like what has this got to do with Islam, then as a community we can start doing stuff about it. But whilst we're having domestic violence or homophobia in our community, and then people from wider society, and the world is so global now, right? So before you'd have your problem in Pakistan and it's down to Pakistan. Now you have a problem in Pakistan, the UK, Canada, India, Saudi, everyone is watching what's going on. So when we say, look, actually there's an issue with domestic violence on women, in Afghanistan, I think it's in excess of 90%. So of women said that domestic violence is an acceptable part of marriage. Yeah. When we looked at a UN study in Egypt around sexual harassment, 99.3% of women reported sexual harassment. 96.5% of those reported physical sexual assault. So when we look at this data around what's happening to women in our community, and then we say nothing to do with Islam, the rest of the world looks at us, and that generates, if you ask me, that generates anti-Muslim sentiment. So when we say actually the far right is growing and anti-Muslim sentiment is growing, I think we also have to say, you know what, there are some idiots out there who are breeding hatred against us using rhetoric of the other. Yeah, but at the same time, there are people who have got no problem with Christians, have got no problem with Hindus, no problem with Sikhs, who've got no problems with black people, have got no problems with Indians or no problems with Chinese people. But when it comes to our community and the scrutiny is placed in it, because we're so adamant that nothing is going wrong, they start thinking, you know what, actually, that community over there, they're not really transparent. They don't seem to be prioritizing women in the way that the rest of the west of the world seems to be moving forward with women's rights. That community over there, when we talk about execution of gay people, they seem to do a lot of whataboutery rather than saying that they're going to stand for not having gay people killed and also stand for gay people's human rights. And we see that in the UK at the Parkfield schools, where we've got a society now where 69% or 68% of the UK society said it's okay to be gay. 20 years ago, that would have been 30%, and it would have been 60-odd%, 67% saying it's not okay to be gay. But now, in a society where 68% are saying it's okay to be gay, we have Muslims standing outside schools, like primary schools, hollering on speakers saying it's not okay to be gay, and chanting things like, with little children, chanting things like, shame, shame, shame. That's going to generate anti-Muslim hate. And who's responsible for that? Well, we have to take some responsibility as a Muslim community that actually what we're doing is we're telling gay people that they shouldn't exist and they shouldn't be alive. And some people are going to hate us for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this kind of like, I mean, not to do whataboutery, but just to acknowledge that this does exist in other societies as well, especially like Orthodox Jews. You know, you hear stories of this guy doesn't want to sit next to a woman on the plane.
And completely. And how do we feel about that? Like when I see that, I'm like, these guys are messed up. You know? So when I'm like an Orthodox Jew doesn't want to sit next to a woman on the plane, I'm like, this community is messed up. It's just absolutely messed up. When we see, there was a Netflix program called One of Us. I don't know if you saw it.
No, I haven't seen it.
And it was about Hasidic Jews and people who left that community.
One of Us.
It's well worth watching.
Okay.
The people who left that community, the way that they're treated is like how ex-Jehovah's Witnesses or how ex-Muslims are treated. And so when we see that, some animosity generates towards those communities because we're like, how dare you treat people so badly? So it's
absolutely.
not whataboutery, it's consistency, if anything. Is that actually people who treat other people like crap get animosity generated towards them.
In a way, that's a good animosity because we like it's coming from a good place that we want everyone to be treated fairly, and we want these regressive values. I think Christianity and Judaism has had longer to deal with it, and Muslim communities are still, in a sense, have this back home mentality. In a sense, I think. One challenge with some of what you're bringing up to when I'm thinking about this is, what do we like? So, for example, in there's more than one source of bad values. So Islam may be causing some of these bad values, but like, for example, in India, which is mostly Hindu, it's like, the statistics on rape are like incredibly high in some areas, and there's a lot of, again, it's patriarchy and it's a misogyny, and it's like this in South Africa, there's it's the rape capital of the world. They have this entitlement value that, like, they were interviewing people and they were saying, yeah, like, I deserve to do it. The men were talking like that, like as if it's their right, and there's no idea of consent. The idea of consent doesn't exist in some of these cultures, right? So, and it's not only limited to Islam, but it's like a mix of Islam plus this misogyny that's part of the culture. And for example, in Afghanistan, they have this bacha bazi culture, which according to Islamic law, you would be killed if you did that. But it's part of the culture. And so there's this mix of things, like honor killing is another example, that it's actually forbidden to kill your daughter. You can't kill your daughter in Islam. You have to, if she does something wrong, you have to go to the judge, and you have to, I mean, why would you even go to the judge about your own daughter? It's so stupid. But for a man to kill his own daughter,
much more accessible to kill her, though, isn't it? Like, because the judge is probably far away, and so you're living in
but the judge may actually rule against you and say, well, actually, no, she did nothing wrong, or she can be forgiven. You can look away. Like, there's hadith in the Islamic context that where, Omar or Muhammad would like turn away when someone said, I committed zina, right? And if it's not the law of the land that she should be killed, she can't be killed. You can't kill her vigilante style in a country that is not the law that, sex outside of marriage is forbidden, right? And if she was a single daughter, she wasn't married, she's not cheating, she wouldn't be killed, she would be lashed. Right, so people are taking these laws and like almost like inventing their own laws that is a mix of Islam. Like it's complicated. It's complicated because it's not part of Islam per se, but it is part of the culture that is influenced by Islam. Yeah. So it's such a tricky thing, right? You know what I'm saying?
But I think that comes back to the question that we have to ask really honestly is, what has this got to do with Islam? So when we look at homophobia in China exists. Homophobia in Pakistan exists. But to think that those two homophobias are identical or are sourced from the same roots of patriarchy is fallacious, isn't it, really? Actually, we have to acknowledge that in Pakistan, the homophobia that exists is so much driven by
it's probably 100%.
Yeah, completely. And actually, and so for people who are gay Muslims, they or gay ex-Muslims will be so used to battling the theology in conversations that Chinese gay people are not experienced, right? So I used to have a conversation about the story of Lut. The Chinese gay person is not talking about the story of Lut when he's experiencing homophobia with his parents. I have to have conversations about hadith and say, actually, some hadiths are inauthentic and these ones that kills gays are inauthentic. My Chinese gay brother is not doing the same thing, right? So we have to look at just the simple question, what has Islam got to do with this? And so whilst it may not say you can kill your daughter, if Islam allows us to set up a value-based system on women's lives which is different to men's life, and that women are valued less in the society, that women are more easily disposable than men, then we have to say this has something to do with Islam, actually.
But like there's contradictory statements in the Quran. For example, the Quran says, whoever buried their daughter alive will be asked on the day of judgment when she comes out, and she's going to be like, she's going to challenge you that, why did you murder me just for being a girl? Now, whether or not that's a historical fact that the pre-Islamic Arabs used to bury their daughters, I'm not sure, but the Quran is condemning it. And Muhammad in the Hadith, he said that whoever raises 2 daughters or 3 daughters righteously will go to paradise. So they used to hate daughters, and for sure daughters are not like valued in cultures where there's a dowry.
let's just stop there, because I think they used to hate daughters as if it's some past tense thing. Like, that's not true. We're in our communities, we still hate daughters. Whenever there's an economic impact between sending two children to school in our community, and you can only finance the boy or the girl, it doesn't matter if the girl is more intelligent, the boy's going to school. Yeah. So, and we see that disproportionate.
But does that have to do with
favouring
gender?
of men.
But does that have to do with gender roles? Because in Islam and also in Orthodox Christianity, like, and Judaism, like the woman is the one that stays home, the man is a breadwinner. It's seen as part of the gender role that the woman, why should, like, for example, my sister-in-law has a degree in engineering, but she's staying at home with the kids. So, like, well, if I have to choose between one of my kids, well, the son, he's going to stay with me. Again, it's back to the same kind of value.
That's just misogynistic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Though, actually, and that misogyny is a form of hatred.
But it's not just
women.
misogyny.
So it's not.
But is it just misogyny, or is it the fact that women, if they're going to have babies, then they have to stay with, like, they don't have to stay with the baby, but there's going to be some time where she's not able to, economically contribute, whereas the son, he's going to be economically contributing. And it's a setup where, the boys stay home and the daughters leave the house. In cultures, in cultures where they kill their daughters, it always tends to be that the son stays home and the daughter leaves, right? So that's part of the system, right?
Of course, it's part of the system, but that culture of your son is here to stay, and your daughter is essentially disposable, is what we're saying. That's a form of hate in some ways, right? So,
but I don't,
or maybe not hate. It's a form of prioritizing men above women, definitely.
Yeah,
and I think so. So when we say what has it got to do with Islam, or when we ask what has it got to do with Islam, is actually in what ways does Islamic patriarchy, which is different from Chinese patriarchy, in what ways does it facilitate for the disposability of women? And that's what I think is an important question. But obviously the response to that is it's nothing to do with Islam. Like that's the party line, right?
So the reason I think why people say nothing to do with Islam, I think it's obviously wrong, and people are in self-denial when they say that. But, like, I came from this kind of Puritanism version of Islam, which is Salafism, where they see Islam in a very narrow perspective, which is only what Muhammad said and did, and that's it. So, for example, honor killing wouldn't be part of Islam, but why is it we find that honor killing is happening in all these Muslim countries? So, like, what happened? Like, why? So these Salafis would say this is wrong, and they would condemn this, and they would bring up the hadith of raising daughters. They would bring up the Quranic verses about killing your daughter.
Really? I mean, really? Would they?
They do. I grew up in this community, and this is what I heard.
So maybe your community would, but I think for actually the rhetoric around women generally is a woman does something, like she might go and do something outrageous, like go and get a job, like, or she might decide that she wants to live in a flat by herself, for example. And then the community response to that isn't pulling out the good verses or the good hadith about women. The community response usually is about actually women being deficient in intelligence, women not being able to take leadership, women needing to be beaten as a form of discipline. I find that actually that's most of the conversation about when a woman does something that isn't conforming to patriarchal norms in our society. Then we pull out the policing. My experience hasn't been, Abdullah, that when women stand up, and take South or Black Sisters for example, when women stood up and said, actually stop beating us, we're not going to send abused women back to their husbands anymore, mullahs didn't come out running with scriptures supporting them. When Pakistan did their march, not even the one that just went, the one before that, when Pakistan had that province that said, look, we're going to launch a domestic violence line, for women, mullahs didn't come running out supporting this. They came running out saying this legislation you're trying to implement, that women can prosecute men who beat them, is anti-Islam. It leads to male insecurity, and actually you can beat your wife lightly. So my experience definitely isn't that Muslims are running around saying women's empowerment, and I think that's reflected in the disparity in educational levels between women and men in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, and all across the globe. And I think it's reflected in the disparity of domestic violence rates that we see in things like Afghanistan, Bangladesh, compared to Western liberal democracies, where actually the rhetoric is women are equal to men.
See, I agree with you. Actually, almost every single thing you said. It's just I don't think it's necessarily fair to compare Afghanistan to liberal Western Iceland or Canada. I would say you'd have to compare to, at the same economic level, for example, India or something. And the best example you can come up with would be like Palestinian Christians versus Palestinian Muslims or something like that, where everything is exactly the same except the religion, and then you could say, okay, well, this is caused by the community. I agree with you 100%. Like I think almost every single thing you said, I agree with you that mullahs and the Islamic community as well is not championing women's rights. Women are definitely like seen as less of a leadership position.
There's a difference between not championing women's rights and actively seeking to curtail women's rights.
I would agree with you even there, because even in Islamic conferences you don't find a lot of women speakers. I do see that this is changing. Like Al Maghrib, which is a big Salafi organization, they have women speakers now. These big conferences that they're having, I'm seeing more and more women are there. But they also have so things that I think in some ways, especially in the Western countries, Western Muslims are changing, and that's at least in Canada. That's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing, like, for example, they had an all women's conference called Being Me, where it's like they had 10,000 plus Muslim women, where they had all women speakers. They had some men speakers too, actually, which is a funny thing. They had men speakers there, but they don't usually have women speakers in the mixed audience. But things, I think, in some ways are changing. But I do agree with you that from the Islamic kind of paradigm, that there is a lot of kind of putting down of women, that they're not encouraged to work, for sure. And I think that's part of, again, the value system that Islam is kind of saying, that women should be staying home, and there's a lot of hadith about that and stuff like that. So I do agree with you. I don't disagree with anything you said basically there.
So I think you're right. Some things are changing. I just, I'm really wary about these things are changing, isn't it? Because when I see that, Muslims in America are more accepting of homosexuality, that's really heartening. But then in the UK, 52% of British Muslims said that homosexuality should be criminalized, and
so why is it so different? What's going on there?
Yeah, so I'm like, when you say things are changing, I'm like,
is it changing good or bad, right?
Are they changing for you, but they're not changing over here? Because over here, I'm seeing more and more women in niqab, which is an aspect of religious conservatism.
Yeah.
And we know that religious conservatism tends to be a bedfellow of homophobia, actually.
And I think
I don't know if you're seeing that in Canada as well, is my question essentially. Are you seeing the rise of the niqab? Are you seeing the rise of the hijab in a way that I'm seeing over here that it wasn't true 5-10 years ago? But now I'm astonished at how much I'm seeing hijabis in primary school, like just swaths of girls covered in hijab when they're like 7-8 years old. That's mind-blowing to me. In the UK, in London, which is probably the most cosmopolitan and diverse part of the UK, this is what I'm seeing, and I'm like, how is this happening in my neighborhood?
Absolutely. And it's definitely, we definitely can't take it for granted that we're all going towards liberalism, because what we find is sometimes fundamentalism comes back. Why does it come back? Like for example, I grew up in a liberal Muslim, Ismaili Muslim family, yet I ended up as a Orthodox Sunni, big beard, praying 5 times a day, spending his life for Islam. How did that happen? And tons of my friends ended up in the same path as myself. They ended up, and I know so many white converts to Islam and black converts to Islam. Why is that happening? So this just emphasizes why what you're doing, what I'm doing, what all not just ex-Muslims, but just in general, I feel maybe the secular community, the atheist community, the ex-Muslim community, what we're doing is so important, because Muslims have higher birth rates, and so there's going to be a lot more Muslims in the world. So we have to constantly, and I love how you keep saying we as if you're still part of the community, because I know they don't want you as part of the community, but you're still respecting them, and you're saying we as if you're part of them, and I can't even do that, because people I think you get even more hate than me. Even in the chat while we're talking, I've had to block 2 people now because of what they were saying.
Why did we block them?
Because
why did you block them?
Because they were being disrespectful, and if you want to have gay sex, that's up to you, and
you should let them stay. It's good to let. How do I see the chat? Let me see the chat.
Yeah, you'd have to go to the link. I'll send you the link. I guess after
Okay.
now it's almost we've been doing this for almost 90 minutes. So
Oh my gosh.
yeah.
Is that how much time has gone past? Wow, this is so long
Well,
overdue.
because we have like a lot of interesting things to talk about, and you
Mm,
have a lot of nuance in what you're saying, and so do I, and you have these authentic experiences. So like, there's so much to discuss, right? That's why it's not like
yeah, yeah.
it's not ending because we keep coming up with, okay, well, what about this?
I didn't even know. I feel like 40 minutes have gone by. I can't believe the time. That's so much time that's gone by. We should do a part two at some point.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
what was your last point? Sorry. Yeah,
Uh
so it's really important what we're doing,
yeah.
which is why when people try and tell me that I should stop, I'm not interested. But at the same time, actually, you're right. I do, and I don't know how much. I don't think this is quite a frequent thing. So I do talk about as if I'm still part of the community. Abdullah, I live in a very Muslim
Oh wow.
part of the UK, and I think it's important for us not to surrender our spaces. It's like, like we're here, we're ex-Muslim, and we're gay, and we're going to live amongst you. Because actually, if I wasn't living amongst you, your hijabi sister is ex-Muslim as well. You just don't know. Do you understand what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you just haven't got a clue. It's like
Yeah.
you think that by ostracizing us or pushing out the ones who are gay or the ones who are visibly ex-Muslim and who are vocal, that somehow you're going to stop the ex-Muslim movement. But at the same time, I know that I'm on a Skype chat with a hijabi ex-Muslim in the UAE, or I know that I'm doing a Skype chat coaching call with a Saudi girl who's wearing the niqab. Like, we're everywhere in the Muslim community.
Yeah.
Trying to get rid of us isn't going to work. It's about learning from other people in our community about what you can learn from us and how that can elevate us as a community is what we should be doing. If you try and silence a part of your community, it's only going to work to your detriment, whether that's women, whether that's gays, or whether that's apostates.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, this has been an amazing conversation. I don't even want
Long
to.
overdue. Long
Yeah.
overdue. Long overdue.
Yeah, absolutely. Like,
How do I see the homophobic comments? Do I have to go
it,
onto like YouTube or
they're all
something?
gone now. So just to kind
That's
of talk about ethics for 1 second before we end
Let's
this,
do
and
it.
then I want you to share where people can find you.
Mm.
Let's think about it. Like, people often compare pedophilia to homosexuality, people that are attacking homosexuality, but just think about it. Homosexuality is in no way immoral because it's not hurting anyone. It's completely consensual. Pedophilia is different because children have not developed yet, right? And nobody is saying we should have pedophilia being legalized. In fact, if anything, it's some people would consider that's part of the religion because chapter 65 verse 4 that allows you to divorce a wife that you slept with that hasn't had her menses yet. So
I can't believe you just did a Dr. Zakir Naik on me. But go on, sorry, carry on.
so honestly, like, it might even be like many Muslims think that it's okay to marry children, right, and to sleep with young girls because of what they think that Muhammad did this, so it's okay. Because if Muhammad did it, obviously it's fine. But let's be honest, between two consenting adults, like why does it bother you? Like, who is it hurting? It's hurting nobody. It's just like if the other argument you're going to bring up is that this is dangerous. Well, so are many other things in life are dangerous, right? For example, jumping from airplanes or climbing mountains. Like if I choose to do something that may or may not be dangerous or safe or whatever, that's my prerogative. Like, what does it have to do with you? Like, we live in a world where everyone has freedom of religion, freedom of expression. We should live in that world. If you don't want to live in the world, imagine you are gay. How would you feel if you were born gay? And people think that actually it's a choice, right? I mean, whether or not it's a choice is a red herring because it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter. And if it was really a choice, I think most gay Muslims would choose not to be gay. Honestly, like, don't you agree?
Completely. I think like the idea that people would choose to be gay in a community where homophobia can get you killed,
Can kill you,
essentially, it's
yeah.
just literally madness. And it shows a complete sense of being divorced from what the realities are for gay people.
Yeah.
So I just want to say a couple of things. So we're always hit with this bloody pedophilia thing
Yeah.
all the time. Like, either it's a slippery slope to pedophilia, like that'll be the next thing. Like if you're okay with gays, then it'll be
Yeah.
pedophilia next, or gay people are pedophiles. Like
Yeah.
that's the other one, right? Like there's
Yeah.
no distinction between them. And so I'm not of the camp of Muhammad was a paedophile, right? So I just think actually contextualize things and look at how what ages people were getting married back then, and look at Western societies and what happened around the age of marriage with girls as well. So I think that's quite a inauthentic criticism, but it's quite sensational, and it's good to stoke the fires, which is why people do it, right? But on paedophilia, the same people who accuse gay men, the same Muslim people who accuse gay men of paedophilia are the same people who never, ever, ever say anything about mass child marriages happening in Yemen, right?
Yeah.
Or they don't say anything about the age of marriage in Saudi Arabia, or they don't say anything about the age of marriage in Iran. So these people they've never thought about saying something about that. They probably don't even know aware of it. And when they are aware of it, they just kind of shrug their shoulders because Muhammad married Aisha. And actually, if we want to talk about pedophilia, the Muslim community is a great place to start that conversation. Because when we look at Yemen, we see that there's sometimes 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old girls getting mass married to 40-year-old men, like in the whole community. Like, that's essentially pedophilia, right? There was even a report that came out of Yemen about a girl who and the authenticity of this report is questionable. It hasn't been 100% confirmed, but human rights activists have given it credence. So there was a report that came out about a Yemeni girl, I think she was 8 or 9 years old, had sex with her 40-year-old husband and died because her body just couldn't handle the sexual intercourse. So if you want to talk about pedophilia in the Muslim community, let's start with heterosexuals first, because that would be a good start.
That's a majority, actually, right?
It's a beautiful place to start. I encourage that conversation about pedophilia. So first of all, if you're okay with gays, then it will lead to pedophilia. So great, let's open that conversation up and talk about straight pedophiles in our community, because there's a lot to talk about, and about how that is reinforced by structures in our society. So when the age of consent tried to be changed in Yemen by secularists, the religious clergy came out and challenged it and said, you're being anti-Islamic because Muhammad married Aisha when she was 8. And we've seen that in Muslim countries across the world. So whatever age. So 6, and consummated in 9, right? So whenever we see that there are Muslim countries that try and change the age of the age of marriage, so that it's raised to like something 16 or 18 years old, actually Muslim clergy come out and they support the pedophilia.
So this is a very good point. Actually, I want to bring this up. I want to talk about this for a second. This is a big problem because many Muslim countries, and there's like documented examples of this, where the religious clergy is fighting against raising the minimum age of marriage because of Islamic interpretation. Now, this is where Islamic reform is so badly needed. But I actually support people that say that, well, maybe she wasn't actually 6 when she was married and 9 when it was consummated. Because if Muslims can agree to this, then they can say, well, I don't have to agree with it, the marriage age. Or if they say, for example, that was the context back then, just because Muhammad did it doesn't mean we need to do it now. Women were different back then. All of these arguments are great and much needed for Islamic reform. The biggest reason why there's child marriage in the world today is because of poverty. So, for example, I saw a documentary about Romania, where these Romanian young girls, like the fathers have no choice because they have like 12 kids or whatever, and they marry off the daughters because it's like, okay, I can get rid of her and I don't have to worry about it. Someone else will provide for her. Even in Bangladesh, because of the rising sea level, so because of environmental reasons now, people are getting like poverty because they're losing land because the water levels are rising. And this one dad was saying, and I have a video where I shared a clip from a news article on this. He's saying, I have to get my 15-year-old daughter married now because I don't have money to take care of her. And so if she's married, her husbands will have to take care of her, not me. So that's the biggest reason for child marriage in the world today. But the Islamic reasons, we have to fight those. And of course, the poverty thing will go away on its own as people get more, as the riches of the world get higher and the poverty levels drop or whatever.
So as you said that this is true, but actually what we're saying though is in somewhere like Iran, where that poverty level isn't the same,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And Saudi, where that poverty level
yeah,
isn't the same,
yeah.
is the blocker isn't poverty.
Exactly.
The blocker is Islamic doctrine and theology.
Yes.
With homosexuality, with child marriage, there are some things in Islam which actually, as a community, we've just been like, you know what? Forget that nonsense. It's wrong. So, for example, we don't try and have slaves anymore, right? Everyone knows it was completely okay. It was totally legit to have a slave. Could have had one in your back pocket. Your wife could have had 2, and your brother could have had 6, and that was absolutely fine. But we know that as a community now, despite it being permissible in Islam, everybody's line is no to slavery. Similarly, even if Islam is hostile towards gay people, there's no reason why we can't take that same stance. Like, actually, yeah, Islam does kind of hate gays, but just like I said, we could have slaves, but we've all decided that's not the case. We can also be like, we can all decide that it's not the case to hate gays anymore.
Yeah, and
same goes for child marriage. We
Yep.
can be like, actually, yeah, okay, that was kind of legitimate, but you know what? We're taking the same party line as we are with slavery. It's no longer okay.
Yeah, and I think this it's going to be different in UK and Canada, US, but like in Canada, I'm seeing that this is what's happening. For example, I have a friend, I don't know if he considers me a friend too, but his name is Faisal Kutti. He's a lawyer. He's a son of a sheikh, Ahmed Kutti. He's a scholar or whatever. And he's written an article why gay marriage may actually be not contrary to Islam, which is a surprising thing. But when you read it, he's saying like there's no reason to deny people the right to get married, 2 men or 2 women, according to Islam. And he has his reasons for that. And this is the kind of Islamic reform argument. Hamza Yusuf as well, it's not really progressive to say that gay people should just be celibate their whole life. It's kind of stupid. But he is saying that, it's their choice if they want to be gay. No, it's not their choice. He's saying if they want to do what they want to do, it's up to them. We have no right to hurt them, to attack them, we don't have to agree with it. I mean, that's the best I guess you're going to get from an Orthodox Muslim. They're going to say, we don't have to agree with you, but it's okay. You can do what you... Well, they don't even say it's okay. They say...
It's not okay.
It's up to you, okay. Basically, and we can't stop you.
If you're attracted towards men, that's okay because you're not committing the sin. If you act on that sin, then that's not okay.
Yeah.
But if you're in the West, you're not in a Sharia state, so it's not our business.
Yes.
If you're in a Sharia state, often the party line is you should be killed.
Now even with that, there's a lot of pushback because I'm finding that among some Orthodox Muslims, for example, Hamza Yusuf, he's saying we don't even want...
I think a lot is an overestimation of how much pushback there is.
Okay,
there's
so
some minimal pushback
sure.
from revisionists and...
But Hamza Yusuf is not a revisionist. Hamza Yusuf is not a revisionist. He's an Orthodox Sunni Muslim.
Okay.
So these guys, what they say is, according to the way they see Islam, it's the maqasid or the goals of Sharia are to preserve life, to preserve wealth, and to preserve lineage, whatever. They say according to these same goals, there's precedent that Muhammad wanted to end slavery, even though he didn't, which again I don't agree with them. But he tried. So okay, hold on. So but their argument is he tried to reduce the forms of slavery. So therefore we can do the same thing and we can say we don't need apostasy law because it's actually for other reasons such as treason and this and that. And these are Orthodox Muslims. These are not revisionists. These are not Amina, Wadud, and these are not people that are like ostracized. These are Orthodox Sunni Muslims saying we don't want these part of Sharia law to come back ever. We don't need this.
So I remember there was another Orthodox Sunni scholar, and he said, it was a white guy, I can't remember what his name is, and he said, execution of apostates would be anti-Islamic now because actually part of Islam is to propagate a perspective and an ethos that makes people want to come and join it. Mm-hmm. And so actually if we're executing apostates now, people will see us as barbaric and backwards, and therefore they won't join Islam. And people were hailing this as some really progressive sort of move. And they thought, you know what, I'm less concerned about Islamic public relations being the manifestation, the reason for manifesting my life, when actually the reason for manifesting my life should be my human rights.
Yeah.
Like, it's such a bizarre, twisted way. But at the same time, I understand that the confines that Islam puts you within, you have to talk nonsense sometimes to try and have a human egalitarian approach towards things, because actually inherently that's not its ethos. Its ethos is Muslims are best,
submission,
everybody
right?
else is and also it's supremacy, isn't it? So its ethos really is Muslims are best, everybody isn't. If you leave Islam, what on earth are you thinking? You should be dead. So I just want to say back to the gay thing, so because you were talking about ethics and such, so we touched on, if you're gay, then the slippery slope thing is everyone's going to accept gays and then we'll accept pedophiles. But before we get to pedophiles, often they're like, if you're gay, and then after pedophiles it's bestiality over here. But there's a stop over here before we get to pedophilia. So it's, if you're gay, next you'll accept incest, then pedophile, then bestiality. And I welcome that. I'm like, hey Muslims, finally we're talking about incest. Fantastic. Can we look at cousin marriage in Pakistan? Because it's absolutely nonsense, like the way that cousins are marrying each other in Pakistan. So again, like the same Muslims who say, oh, it's going to lead to incest or it's going to lead to pedophilia, they never want to talk about actual heterosexual incest, which is actually abuse that happens in our families. So when because of the way that Islam is structured and the ways of women's voices are silenced, and the power dynamic is so skewed in Muslim families and Muslim communities, that when uncles are molesting nieces or nephews, or when brothers are molesting their younger sisters, that stuff doesn't get picked up in our community as it does in other areas in other communities. In addition to that incest, can we also have a conversation about cousin marriage as well, and what the potential repercussions about that? So these people who pretend like they care about pedophilia and incest never seem to really care about it when it applies to heterosexual people, who are the majority.
Absolutely, totally. So I think that we should end on that, as we've gone through a lot of really, really great conversations. This is actually one of the most interesting live chats I've had in a long time. I think the last one I had
Somebody just mentioned thalassemia. We can save thalassemia. I've uploaded the Google chat onto my computer so I can see the chat.
Oh, okay.
Someone just mentioned thalassemia, and it's like, we can save that for another conversation.
What is that?
Thalassemia is a like, you know how with African black people you have sickle cell anemia?
Oh, okay.
Thalassemia is a genetic disorder within South Asian people, and sometimes, well, if you're prudent, when South Asian people are going to marry each other, they can have a genetic test to see if they are a carrier or they have thalassemia, because if two people who have thalassemia get married and then have a child, there's a significant risk to that child's well-being and health.
Okay. And there was a question earlier about, I don't know if you just want to make that the very last thing. What would you say to people that say it's a test? Allah is testing you. I mean, I've read Muslims say this, like ex-Muslims, gay Muslims. They're like, I'm just going to be celibate my whole life. Like, it's a test, right?
Yeah. It's a good question, isn't it? There's a really long answer to that, actually. All I would say is this, is that when you exist as a gay Muslim, you either exist as a Muslim identified gay, so you lead with your Muslim identity, and your gay identity is secondary, and so those people are usually in the mosque and in the Muslim community, or you lead your life as a gay identified Muslim, so you lead with your gay identity and your Muslim identity comes secondary, and those people are usually out in the gay clubs in the queer community and they have lots of gay friends. But underneath both of those, there's this ever-present threat of hell about your sexuality. And the way to really pass that test is to just take apostasy and rub it all out.
That's a good one. So where can people find you? You're on Twitter?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter as Jimmy Bangash. You can probably find me and Abdullah tweeting arguments.
Are you banned on Facebook right now? I'm going to share your link.
No, I'm not. I feel like that's really calmed down, actually. So I don't know if it has for you as well.
No, it's not calmed down. I just got back from like another 30-day ban. I've been banned 90 days now. It's so unstable. It's just like when people decide to like attack your posts.
When people attack me now, when there's an option to write a little message to Facebook, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which didn't used to work before. But now when I write in it, I've been writing, can you please check, because people are targeting my Facebook.
Yeah.
Please check if this is the same person who's reported me before.
Yeah.
If so, please block them from my account.
Okay.
Rather than, so just maybe trying to give them some help around that. So it hasn't happened for a while. It will probably happen now that we've said this. It happens all the time. It's futile. Stop it, whoever you are. Like, let's have conversations, or we're having conversations. We're not attacking each other physically. So dialogue is really good. It stops violence. So yeah, you can find me on Facebook. My Facebook is Jimmy London. It's not Jimmy Bangash. Where else you can find me is there's a beautiful book, actually. I think I have it. Just wait here.
Okay. So while he's getting it, I'm just sharing the links for Jimmy's stuff. Okay, Leaving Faith Behind. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Is that on Amazon?
Book. Yeah, it's on Amazon. It's Leaving Faith Behind. It's written or it's edited by Fiyaz Mughal, who's Muslim and quite a prominent figure in the Muslim community. Actually, he started an organization, or heads up an organization called Tell Mama, which reports on hate crimes towards Muslims. Yeah, he approached Aliyah Salim, who's the co-founder of Faith to Faithless, who's an ex-Muslim, and they decided to write a book together capturing ex-Muslim voices. So I've got a chapter in that. So if anyone wants to read more about my story, you can read it in there. And then the last place to find me is Free Hearts, Free Minds. And this is a scheme that I set up with Yasmin Mohammed. And what we do is we work with people who are in Muslim countries who are apostates, but they have no one to talk to. Often they're suicidal, or they're suffering from depression, anxiety, completely withdrawing from society. Because I work as a life coach and my training as a therapist, I work with these people and give them 6 coaching sessions. If you want to support us, please go to our website, Free Hearts, Free Minds. Even if it's just to send us a nice email about the work that we're doing, you can read all the testimonials on there. I'm also doing another live podcast about that this Sunday, so you can find details of that, I think, on Twitter. I tweeted it out as well.
So I've shared all of Jimmy's links. Thank you, Jimmy, and apologize to those of you who joined and we were running late. Had some technical problems, but we got there. We did this. We finally did it. So Jimmy, all the best, and let's do this again sometime.
Definitely. Long overdue. I'm really pleased that we got to catch up and have a chat.
All right, and thank you everyone for your support and for joining us. And please do subscribe if you're new here. I hope to continue making some useful content, and stay tuned for some more.